So we are going to go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Aloni. I'm with Schneps Media. Schneps Media is the largest local media company in the New York metro area. We publish over 80 newspapers, magazines, websites, webinars, podcasts, and events throughout Queens, Manhattan, Bronx, Brooklyn, Long Island, the East End, Westchester, Palm Beach, Florida, and Philadelphia. But today we are thrilled to be here with you and being able to host this important webinar, Democratizing Philanthropy. You don't have to be a billionaire to give like one. We're going to discuss how caring people and nonprofits work with their community foundation to make life better in Queens and beyond. And we're fortunate to have a phenomenal panel who's going to share their experience and help us all to do good and feel good by supporting local causes, no matter how much we have to give. So I'm thrilled to introduce our panel. First, please welcome Paula Kirby. Paula is the managing director of Plaxall and a philanthropist. Welcome, Paula. Please share a bit about yourself.
Unmuting. Okay. So hi, nice to see everyone here. I am a member of a third generation family business that was started by my grandparents, and you can see my grandfather here behind me. And it was started in Long Island City around 1938, when this community was a much different place, I would add. And in 1947, my grandparents decided to start a foundation. The Math is Full Foundation. And so we have been managing the foundation ever since. And it gives us the opportunity to support so many amazing nonprofits here in the community and civic institutions, religious institutions. But it helps us help these great places make the community even better. So that's why we do it.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. Next, please welcome the president and CEO of the Queens Public Library, Dennis Walcott. Dennis, please share about yourself.
Well, first, good afternoon to all. It's a pleasure to be a part of it. I'm a Queens person. I was born and raised in Queens. I basically was born at St. John's Hospital on Queens Boulevard and have lived my entire life in Queens, went to public school in Queens. And I have the honor and the pleasure to being the head of a great institution, the Queens Public Library. And it's just an opportunity to serve the community and serve the borough and be in partnership with great people like people who are part of this panel and how we benefit the residents, especially the new immigrants. So it's an honor to be a part of it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And now please welcome New York Community Trust President, Amy Freitag. Amy, please share about yourself with everyone.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be in this Zoom room with Elizabeth Schneps, with Dennis, Paula. Just thank you so much for letting me join this great Zoom room. I work at the New York Community Trust, which is New York's community foundation, serving 8 counties from Westchester to the East End of Long Island. 12 million plus New Yorkers. And my background is that I worked in a bunch of different roles in New York City nonprofits and government. I got to serve like Dennis did in the Bloomberg administration in the Parks Department. And I spent my days in Flushing Meadows, Corona Park at the Capitol Division. So I really love New York City. And in this role at the New York Community Trust, we get to touch every part of the city. And I'm looking forward to talking about that today and just so grateful again to be here. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Amy. So let me get started with Paula. Paula, I would love for you to tell us about how your family made giving a priority and how that shaped you as a person and as a philanthropist.
Well, I think you need role models, you need examples, and we had amazing examples in our grandparents and our parents. And I think just the idea that our grandparents decided in 1947 to start this foundation. They did not have a lot of money at that time. And but it was something that they just sort of seeded early on. And it has now become, it's not a huge foundation. It's not the Ford Foundation, but it's enough that we can provide donations and assistance to quite a few worthy institutions here. And it was also, I would say, it was not just the writing of checks, but our grandparents and our parents were actively involved in volunteering, in being board members. I'm actually a board member of the Queens Public Library Foundation, so I know Dennis very well, and also the Queens Museum and the LIC bid. And I have cousins who are, our children, or you name it. There are just a lot of institutions that we are actively involved in, not purely just providing a donation to. And it does make you feel good to be giving back and to be a part of the community in this way. So we try and also provide example to the next generation. So for example, they know that before the year end, we make a list of our giving and our planned giving, and we tell the children, and by now they're almost adults, but we tell them, you've got $500, divvy it up the way you want to, and find some institutions that you feel strongly about and let us know. And so they get involved early on.
I love that, really just, and it doesn't matter the dollar amount, but what you're teaching is that idea that every year we're going to allocate money and we're going to determine where we're going to, going to give. And how has that instilled that, how have you seen that value and that joy of giving flourish in your family?
I think, I'm hoping that when the time comes, when you're in college and so on, it's a little bit different, but when you actually start working, that they will each get involved, outside of their work, doing something that helps the community. And they certainly see me doing that, and my husband in other ways up in Westchester. So, hopefully, fingers crossed, they will do the same.
The example, like you said, mentors and examples are so powerful. So, with all that wonderful giving, Dennis, share with us the impact that donations have on the Queens Library, and why are donations so very important?
Well, donations to the library from people like Paula and others in the Community Trust have benefited us in so many different ways, both small and large, and how we serve the diversity of the borough of Queens. For example, the New York Community Trust has provided the library a grant that's allowed us to extend our Wi-Fi capability in all of our branches, all 65 branches throughout the borough. And that's given people the ability to have Wi-Fi capacity outside of the branch as well as inside the branch. And in addition to that, they provided an instructor for individuals on how to take advantage of those type of services, and especially around hotspots. But people like Paula has just been tremendous. I just can't say enough about Paula as far as the way she leads, the way
You're embarrassing, Paula. You're embarrassing, Paula.
Well, this is the perfect opportunity to embarrass her, because Paula, to me, is the quintessential individual when it comes to the giving back, the benefiting of the community, the being represented as far as a board member of the foundation, but even beyond the library, just a person who is that type of role model. And we, the library, try to make sure we allow our programs and services to benefit the residents. We never lose sight of who we're there to serve. And as people know, I say it all the time, we're the last truly open democratic institution. We don't ask you for your card. We don't ask you for your background. We don't ask you about anything in coming through our doors. And now, thanks to the trust, outside of our doors to get services. And that's what we're about. And if I can just pick up on one point that Paula talked about, because to me it's so important, around the issue of role models and what role models will do. When I think of a role model, I think of the role models I grew up with, but also I think of the role models that I've met professionally. And one really jumps off the page, as well as a number of people, but it's directly tied into this presentation, and that's Dr. James Dumpson. And Jim Dumpson was a key part of the New York Community Trust. I think probably Jim was my first knowledgeable contact as far as the trust. And when you talk about a role model, Jim, I think, lived to be 100 plus. I remember going to Jim's 100th birthday party, and Jim was always a very active individual. And he set that tone, and people like Megan McLaughlin and Maurice Lutsky and others, they provided that foundation for us to really see what giving is about, benefiting the community, not being about self. And that's what we try to do at the Queens Public Library.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. It's so important to people who give, they not only are these, the things that are happening within the library, but share a little bit too about, how do charities build community and impact neighborhoods as a whole?
So this is a perfect example of how charities build both communities and neighborhoods, boroughs, and a city. And really not just being a charity that looks at the macro issue, but really getting into the micro issues that impact neighborhoods and communities. And I think a place like the Community Trust provides that opportunity because one is donor designated and you can get that donor involvement and involved. More importantly, it allows you to not have $1 billion, like you said. You can have a very small amount, and people benefit from that. Personally, my wife and I try to really give even beyond our means. And we look for those out-of-the-way organizations to give to, and organizations that both do a lot of big things, but also those small organizations that are neighborhood-based that are providing an important service. And that, to me, is the important role of a charity, and really taking a look at how they benefit those pockets of neighborhoods. And by participating in forums, webinars like this, it allows people to get a better understanding both from the outside of a place like the Trust or Paula and others, but more importantly, it gives those charities, those philanthropies, the opportunity to hear more directly from the neighborhoods as far as how it shapes their giving and some of the priorities they want to put in place.
Thank you for that. You also touched upon something I wanted to get into a little bit further too, is that, I think sometimes people really do feel like, oh, I don't have a lot of money to give. It's not going to be meaningful. It's not going to make a difference. Can you speak to that? You touched upon it a little bit about when you talked about you and your wife, but, I just think about myself, my children, speak to that, because I think a lot of us feel, how much do we have to give?
So I'm a big believer, always been a big believer in, if a person, an organization has a penny more, a dollar more than they had before, then that's something that will benefit that organization, especially not making them work so hard that the penny or the dollar that they're getting is going to cost them $1 or $5 to raise it. And so really, how do you allow people to understand that their dollar, their $5, their donation at the store, when you have opportunities to donate through something you purchase, will benefit a community, will benefit an individual. And people love not-for-profits, but I think sometimes people may take for granted on what it costs to provide a service, to run a not-for-profit, to do it in a very qualitative way. And every dollar along that line helps because it really pinpoints an opportunity for a donor to say, I want to give because of a particular interest, whatever that interest may be. And not-for-profits, the library, but not-for-profits in general, benefit from that type of giving because you develop a relationship. And it's a relationship between the individual and the giver as far as making sure you cultivate it, but also making sure they're able to see how their dollar, how their $5, how their 20 cents benefit that organization. And to me, that's an important part both for a donor to understand, but also for the people who are receiving the dollars and trying to make sure that that type of amount doesn't deter an individual from giving.
That's a really good point. Truly, anything that you give, you feel energetically, your heart, you feel a connection to that organization, which then benefits you and the organization, that back and forth relationship. And no matter what you can give, like that affects other people. And it's like, if we all can do that, if we can all just even give a small amount, it all adds up. It all adds up. So I think that relationship piece, Dennis, that was, thank you for bringing that forth.
I was going to add one thing to that is that people, because our name pops up on a lot of, sponsorships or this, that, and the other, that we must be giving tons and tons of money, but we have a limited budget. And I would say, a lot of our gifts are under $1,000 because these are smaller groups, smaller nonprofits, and every bit helps. And so, and we do get so many requests. It's hard. I wish we could give more, but in order to sort of maintain the foundation and keep that money going for the future, we have to choose. And so, we do give quite a bit when it's something like the Queens Public Library or the Queens Museum or Jacob Riis, where we have these active board roles and so on. But in general, we try and just make sure everybody around here who is worthy is receiving some of the money.
Can I embarrass Amy and Paula for 1 more second? Because I think there's a key part of giving as well. When the New York Community Trust name, or when Paula's name is attached to something, it really provides the seal of approval and quality, because people take them and the organization seriously. And seeing a Paula investment or a Paula involvement, doesn't even have to involve money, or seeing an Amy and the New York Community Trust engaged in some structured way, allows that organization to really have, I think, both internal pride, but also it sends an external signal to the public at large. So going back to your original point about the amount, sometimes it's not the amount that matters. It's making sure that, one, you're trying to do the right thing, but two, that having the validators of those individuals, or the validation of those individuals, supporting that organization and really searching out the smaller organizations and the larger organizations, allows those organizations to take that next step forward.
That's great. It's like the influencers, those people that you feel that you can trust, and that that where they're putting their eye is a place that is a safe place for you to put your eye. And I think we can all do that in our communities, right? We give to New York Community Trust, and we're really the influencer in our sphere, whether it's our family or our community, in helping them to feel comfortable in giving. So that's a great point. Thank you, Dennis. So I want to hear more about.
I have to say one more thing, though, interject here, because Dennis is thoroughly embarrassing me. But I want to say I'm sort of the mouthpiece for my family. So this is all a family foundation, and if you know my cousin Matthew, he's typically the quieter one, so he's not going to be out there. So I take more of the air in the room, but it really is representing every one of my family members when I'm out there doing something for the foundation.
Thank you. Always, a beautiful giver is someone who is not always so thrilled in taking the spotlight and giving. But that is okay. I'm glad she's here to let us all know. So Amy, please, I want to know more about New York Community Trust. I want to know how it works and how you connect donors with high impact nonprofits.
Well, I mean, you've got it right here on the screen, right? You have an incredibly generous family, long legacy in New York. You have great institutions like the Queens Library, and the New York Community Trust tries to be the bridge, right? We try to connect those generous New Yorkers with those high impact nonprofits so that we can do the most good. And we do that in all 8 counties, Westchester, Long Island, and the 5 boroughs. So, but it's a great question, right? Because it turns out that a lot of people kind of scratch their heads on what is a community foundation. And it really is this 2-part mission, is finding those generous donors and supporting those nonprofits. And I love what Dennis said, because one of our greatest joys is if we can be the first grant to a new nonprofit that needs that good housekeeping seal of approval, and we can lower the barriers to other funders coming in. So just like Paula said, we won't necessarily be the biggest gift, but we like to be an early gift, and we like to be a high impact and a systems thinking gift. What I love about the New York Community Trust, we'll stick with a topic for a decade, and we will keep plugging away at it and plugging away at it. It's patient capital, right? So let me just talk a little bit about this 2-part mission. So this past year, we made about $200 million in grants all across those 8 counties. And about 50 million of that came from gifts that have been given to us in trusts. So in other words, somebody, and they're great examples in Queens in particular, of families that believed in their borough, loved their borough, And when they passed on, they left a legacy for their family. So that allows us to make the kinds of grants that are really impactful at places like the Queen's Library. And honestly, Paul, I went through your grants and we overlap in lots of great places, the Queen's Museum and others. But there's also a whole group of active donors. People are still very much alive and love New York, and they trust us to hold what we call donor advised funds. And then they will reach out to us through our portal multiple times a year and say, please make a grant to the Queen's Museum, please make a grant to the Queen's Library. And then we are sort of behind the scenes and we process that grant for them. And about 60% of those funds stay in New York City. So that's about 150 million of our grants every year. And so what we like to do is try to work with those donors and help them know about great opportunities like giving to the Queen's Library. And the trust was really involved during the COVID response time. We put together a fund of about $80 million, which was groups, individuals, foundations pooling their money together. And within a week of the shutdown, the New York Community Trust was writing grants. And I think that was one of those moments, as it was during Hurricane Sandy, as it was after 9/11, where the Community Foundation hears and feels the community need, and then we try to respond. So it's an extraordinary honor to work here. The last thing I'll just say is that I think, we have historic funds that go back 100 years. We're about to celebrate our 100th birthday in 2024. And we have funds that were given to us 75 years ago, and they might have been just a teeny tiny grant back then, but we steward them and we invest them. And whenever there's income, we make grants from them. And it is truly that tapestry of big and small people of all walks of life, school teachers, postmen, wealthy bankers, all come together at the New York Community Trust, and they have built the Community Foundation that takes care of New York in good times and bad. So it's an honor to get to work here.
Wow, incredible. So can you tell me a little bit of how does New York Community Trust differ from private foundations?
Right. So I recently worked with a family foundation, not unlike Paula's own family foundation, another New York City legacy family, the J.M. Kaplan Fund. And, in that case, you have a very specific family with a very specific focus. Like I love that Paula's is so community focused and Queens focused. The difference here, though, is that the New York Community Trust is like this wonderful sort of community organization where all kinds of donors come together and pool their resources to make impact. And we can also do some kind of cool things that private foundations can't do. People can give us weird things and we can turn it into grant making, like buildings or art and other things. So we can take what we call illiquid assets and turn them into philanthropy. So we try to be this extraordinary bridge between generous individuals and lots of nonprofits in the city. And in that way, we can have sometimes a broader impact. The other thing I think is really specific around community foundations, and by the way, we're one of 800 across the country. Right. So there are a lot of community foundations. And what we all share in common is that we're obsessed and love our location. We're place-based, proudly place-based. So we try to know everything about our community. And we give grants from everything from child welfare to climate change to, helping people spay and neuter cats in Queens. We do it all. And so our goal is to really know this place and be as supportive of the community as possible. And not to say that that's different from private philanthropy, but in this case, we are all very adamantly focused on a particular community and trying to support that community in perpetuity, which is a long time, as you know.
So if someone wants to donate and wants to put their money with New York Community Trust, then they would know that you've already looked at the organization, you've vetted the organization, and you know that this is a safe organization. Because I think that's also something that someone who's a novice in giving is, knowing that your money is going to organizations that are really going to make best use of it and get it to the people in need.
Yeah, I have to give it up to my predecessors. By the way, I'm only the fourth president in 100 years.
Wow.
So 3 giant people precede me, and they put together really, really thoughtful processes so that we would really do the kind of due diligence that donors want to make sure that the organization that's receiving the funds is going to do the most good with those funds. So it's something we're very proud of, but at the same token, we don't want to create barriers that new organizations and organizations that are just learning the ropes of nonprofit can't support. So our grant makers tend to do a lot of support for those early stage organizations to help them get over some of those hurdles, again, so that they're not only fundable by the New York Community Trust, but by the wonderful community of philanthropy that we exist in. And we like to be partners to all. So we're all in this together and to do the most good for New York.
Fantastic. So 100 years. Going back, why was New York Community Trust created originally?
So I'm going to say I hail from the great state of Ohio. And the first and oldest community foundation was the Cleveland Foundation. And, you know, those New Yorkers just got on the train. I guess they didn't fly then, maybe. And they went out to Cleveland and they're like, this is a great idea. Where all the great banks of that town came together and pooled their charitable assets so that they could make really thoughtful grants. Literally, New York went a couple of years after the foundation of the creation of the Cleveland Foundation, and we basically replicated their form. And that was replicated across the country, and that was transformative for philanthropy across the United States. We just happened to really do our job really well. So now we're among the biggest and oldest of the community foundations, but we work in a really great community of community philanthropy. And we all get together periodically and compare notes to see how we can do our work better. But it was this beautiful idea of a bunch of really extraordinary organizations coming together to try to do the most good for their community.
Wow. So I know you have a lot of stories in your head about donors in Queens. Can you share a few of those?
Oh my God, there's so many, but I'm not going to do them all. But I got to tell you this one I've just recently learned about. I just love. So in the early like around the 19 teens, a woman was born in Kew Gardens. Her name was Ruth Leffler. You may not know her now, but back in the 40s or 50s, you never wanted to be on a golf course with Ruth Leffler because she was like the 5-time state champion woman golfer. And not only was she a great golfer, her mother was a great golfer, her husband was a great, whatever. She was a killer golfer. She loved it. And she loved Queens, and she spent her life here. When she passed on, and I'm going to tell you, she didn't pass on that long ago. She died in the 1990s. Her family honored her memory by creating a generous fund. And the Leffler Fund has been a bedrock funder of children's organizations for now 25 years. And you want to here's what's amazing. By the time they finished the fund, it was a wealthy family. They did very well. They left us $7 million. Since she's died, we've made $7 million worth of grants, and her fund is even bigger now. So that will go on for hundreds of years. There will be a Ruth Leffler Fund, and it will be supporting children in Queens, and she will have done tens of millions of dollars worth of goodness in her home borough. It's an extraordinary legacy, and we are so proud to not just have the Leffler Fund, but we have the fund of a family that produced seeds, school teachers, developers from Long Island City. Many, many, many great stories of philanthropy in Queens in particular.
Wonderful. So wonderful to hear the personal stories. So, Paul, I wanted to circle back to you a little bit. And then, so many have benefited, as we've heard, from you and your family's generosity. How have you benefited personally? And how has it personally benefited your children?
So I spent about 20 years actually out of Queens, living over in Europe. And when I came back and started to get involved with the family business, I was, I had seen my mother volunteering at Jacob Riis. I had seen, I'd seen the Plaxall name on a few things. So I knew we were somewhat involved, but when I came back, I was like overwhelmed when I realized how much we were doing and how impactful it could be by actually participating on the board. And by, I think one of my assets as being a networker, and I'll find times where something's going on at the Queen's Library and I'm like, oh, you know what? It could be really great to introduce them to somebody over there at Jacob Riis. I mean, that's a bad example because they already know everybody, but that kind of thing, and trying to make these connections. And I think, what else do I say? I think also people don't necessarily really understand what all of these great institutions do. I mean, the library, for example, I think kids are like, oh yeah, that's where I can get a book. No, it's where you can learn about how to write your resume, or do a mock interview, or learn, how to process immigration papers, or to learn another language, or this or that. There are just so many programs out there, or same thing with Jacob Riis, to actually come to Jacob Riis on Family Day, which is what my children have joined me on that, and to see these kids and enjoying a tiny bit of what we give, to have after school programs, or to have senior programs and this and that. And I think yeah, for me, it really is wonderful to see what we've been able to do. And it's not just with the checks, but actually being a participant. And so hopefully, yeah, I think my kids get a kick out of it too. But
that's beautiful. Thank you so much. So before we go to the questions, because we have a lot of questions, I just wanted to quickly go to each one of you and ask for your advice and how you would recommend how someone would get started to become, a philanthropist at any level. So, Amy, why don't I start with you? If you can share how someone could get started.
So look, I think you can start real small. I think there's such goodness, as Dennis and Paula were saying earlier. It's not always the biggest gift. It can be the most well-timed gift. It can be the most heartfelt gift. But, when you break it down, the word philanthropy itself, the Greek root is about the love of people, right? And to really feel the joy of having the opportunity to make a difference in an organization or a place or the lives of people that you care about. I just think you shouldn't be overwhelmed. You can open a fund at the New York Community Trust for literally $1. Like, you can go really small, but I would think hard about the things that you care most about, and think about ways that you can do. And it's not always just giving dollars. It can also be giving time, right? And starting to volunteer for an organization you care about. So Paula has sort of seen the organizations from the inside out, the joy she gets of being on the board of the Queen's Library. There are ways that you can give of yourself in ways of money and time that can be equally valuable. So just start. Don't be afraid. And always, we have a website full of resources for people that want to learn how to do philanthropy, and we welcome you.
Thank you for that. I actually put in the chat the contact giving@nyct-cfi.org, as well as the phone number to learn more about giving and getting started in that. So I did put that in the chat, everybody. And also I will send it out to everybody tomorrow. But Dennis, what would be your advice that you'd give people that want to get started?
To me, in addition to what Amy talked about, and also what Paula said as well, is doing your research and really doing the due diligence as far as where your interests may be and the type of organizations that are out there, and whether through the trust or just the volunteering of the time and your energy, how you can benefit that organization of interest, that community of interest that you may have. One of the new things that we're doing, we started, I guess, 9 months ago now, is we do food pantry work with the New York Food Bank. And so we're out at various libraries with food pantry folks, and have, unfortunately, long lines of people who are desperate for food. Doing that type. So then that sparked my interest in the New York Food Bank, because I said, let me look it up. And then my wife, Denise, and I said, well, let us give some money directly. And to me, it's about research and how you benefit that area of interest to benefit the community, and taking a look at, okay, I may not have a lot of money, but I do have some time. I do have available time on the weekend. What can I do to help this group out? And I was raised in an environment of giving, and I've seen that all around. I know people who just sacrifice themselves in so many different ways. And it benefits the community, it benefits that neighborhood, it benefits an individual. And I think it all starts with getting online, doing your research, talking to individuals, people who may already be engaged in either directly giving of money or their time, and getting feedback on, well, how can I get involved in that way? And then, as you just indicated with the trust, utilizing the trust. I mean, what you're doing right now, I think, is a tremendous benefit to the community at large, and especially for people to be aware of the trust and what the trust does. And that, to me, is a recommendation I would always talk about: is the research, follow up, doing your due diligence, and then getting involved.
Thank you for that. That's great advice. Paula?
Well, I think these two have pretty much answered most of these. But in our case, there are so many sort of smaller startup type of nonprofits here in Long Island City. And because, we're always around, we get to meet everybody. So I know a lot of the people who are involved in these nonprofits. So when they come over and they tell us, and here's what we're going to use the money for, and this is the kind of programming, and this is that, like, we see it in action. So it's really easy to make that decision to say, you know what, it's important and they're doing the right thing. I think when, we also do give to sort of larger national institutions as well, and educational institutions as well. But with the larger national ones, we do definitely do our due diligence and look up and make sure. I mean, there are certain charities that over time the management changes or the direction changes, and we try and stay on top of that because, if it's not heading the way we think is appropriate or something, we'll shift our gifts. So
That's good advice. And I feel like that's one of the wonderful things about New York Community Trust is that you can trust that, they're doing that due diligence, that someone who maybe not know that much or not know how to do it or not feel that they can to go know that New York Community Trust is doing that. I feel like it kind of gives people an ease to being able to give and know that it's going somewhere that's reputable. For sure. Thank you. Thank you for that. So I do want to turn to some questions. We have great questions from attendees. The first question is, when I give, do I need to give to a specific program at a nonprofit? Maybe Amy, you can take that one in terms of when that's
right. Well, I look, it's, big organizations break down into lots of different pieces. And I think Dennis can speak to all the incredible programs that go on at the Queen's Library. But one thing we know, and we certainly know this coming out of COVID and every other time, is that if you believe in an organization and you really want to support the organization, trusting the organization to use those funds in a way that will maximize their benefit to the organization is kind of a beautiful thing, right? So when possible, we love to give the organization some flexibility with the funding. That's not always possible. Sometimes our funds are very restricted for a very specific thing, but I guess our general thought is that the organizations do a pretty darn good job. If you trust them to spend the money in the way that's going to do the most good.
That's a very good point. Thank you for that. Andy wanted to know to Dennis, what roles do the libraries play in the community that people usually overlook? I think Paula answered some of that, but Dennis, please share other ways.
So we open our doors at Central at 10 o'clock in the morning. And by 9:15, we have a long line of people waiting to get in. It's the asylum seekers and the individuals who are coming for their IDNYC. And we help provide translations for those individuals. We're there to make sure that they are able to get the information they need, get the IDs they need, but also to broaden that network of individuals on the programs of the library. And I think Paula articulated it very well in the beginning in talking about the resume development, the job searches, and how we do that. But also we have the high school degree programs that we provide. We have our community mobile libraries that go out into the community itself, and our mobile libraries are all over the place. People may not know that we work with individuals who are moving out of Rikers Island and providing them support as well. and making sure that they're able to get both the technological support of how to navigate the world and the system, but also the job referrals and support in that area. So we work with a variety of populations, not just about books. And I think the other thing is, and a lot of people know this, but still don't want to take it for granted, and that we have free access to computers. And people can come in who may not have computers. And again, that ties in also to the direct relationship with the trust as far as not just the Wi-Fi extenders, but also providing an instructor, which is a really important part of how to navigate hotspots. I would benefit from that instructor because I don't know how to navigate a hotspot. And so, I mean, those types of things are things that we do at the library. And then, real quickly, just this past weekend, we had so many things going on between our food bank relationship. We were doing environmental cleanup in parks and land around the various libraries and working with volunteers. We have a lot of those types of things. It's not the type of library I grew up with, and it's not the type of library even my adult children grew up with. It's a very expansive service-based program in addition to the normal day-to-day library services that people expect.
Wow, incredible. So we have another one. Thank you for that, Dennis. We have another wonderful question from Addison. Is it better to give a little bit to a lot of nonprofits or to give a lot to a fewer nonprofits? What's more impactful?
I don't know, Paula, you want to take that one?
I think in our case, we probably started with a lot fewer, but as Long Island City has sort of become this cool area and has so many great, community-based institutions and so on, a lot of people come and ask us for support. And so ultimately, we've taken sort of this idea that there are a few key institutions or organizations, and we donate a lot of time and more money to those. And then on the other side, we do the smaller donations. And I would say everybody is really thankful. And I don't think anybody should be stopped from making a donation because you think it's too small, because that is just crazy. It will always benefit the institution and it'll make you feel good. So do it.
Well said.
I'll say that, look, can you imagine how many nonprofits exist within the 8 counties that we serve? If we gave a penny to each, it would be wonderful, but yet not as impactful. So I think what you'll see, and you can read a lot about our funding strategies on our website. We will take on an issue and try to be very focused, and we'll take a bet on a systems change, on a way to make something work. Let me just say, like dolphins didn't just show up in the Bronx River one day. That was decades and decades of work with great nonprofits like the Bronx River Alliance and people on the Queens waterfront and elsewhere, where we were really working for cleaner water and environmental justice. And so we will tend to focus our resources to make that kind of long-term impact to a place. But we have the luxury of that because we have all of these historic funds that come together and we can be very deliberate. So, you hate to ever say, no, I agree with Paula. There's not a bad gift, but we like to think that when we can be purposeful and strategic and we can bring a lot of impact together, we can have a much bigger long-term impact on an issue in New York.
Can I also pick up on that? Because I think you as the giver have to analyze your own capacity as well. And not in the capacity of just giving, but the capacity of expectation as well. Because you may have expectation, and Amy talked about it earlier as far as, I'm not saying it like this, more of the unrestricted type of gift and trusting the organization versus having a very defined prescription on what your expectation is. You as the giver have to look at what your expectation will be in your gift itself, and then your own internal capacity to manage that expectation. And again, that's the beauty of the trust itself. But this is going to sound weird coming from a person who loves gifts, but you need to be strategic, as Amy said, and Paula indicated. But to me, it's also important to set realistic expectations on what your own capacity is to both analyze the benefit of the gift and also how much you want the organization to do that.
Thank you for that. Very thoughtful. Thank you. I do want to share that Mike said, Paula of Plaxall, thank you for Culture Lab LIC, excellent art and music. And he also said, thank you, Queens Public Library, so many programs, truly. So I do want to share that from one of our attendees. Thank you for that, Mike. So we have another question from Spencer. How do I get started being philanthropically involved? If I mail a check-in, they may not know how enthusiastic I am about their mission. Do I just call up a nonprofit I like and ask them if I can volunteer or join their board? What do you recommend to Spencer?
Well,
it goes with Dennis talking about expectations. What are your expectations with that?
Who's going to take it?
Go for it, Paula. I think you're good.
Well, I would say we've found, so Culture Lab, going back to that is one that we actually, the Plaxall is sort of a founding member of. We had some open space and we knew that some artists were looking for an area to show their work. And we said, you can use it for 2 months and we'll see how it goes. And almost 7 years later, we now have a nonprofit, and it is focused, a lot of it is on the arts and performing arts and so on. But right away from the beginning, we said, we don't want any divas here. Like, we know space is at a premium here in Long Island City. And when people call us up and say, do you have a space where we can host a library program, for example? I think when the library down at the waterfront wasn't open yet, and we're like, sure. Or when someone calls up Melva Miller and says, we need someplace to do census training, we're like, sure. So we've made this space very flexible so that it can be utilized, sort of, I'm not going to say 24/7, but a lot more often than if we were just doing arts programming on the weekends or on, Thursday and Friday evening. So I think what has attracted a lot of people to Culture Lab is the opportunity to volunteer there. So I'm just going back to how you could get involved. Is a lot of people have come in and they'd say, you know what, we really love that you guys are providing this for free and we'd like to volunteer and help out. And so I think they have this huge number of volunteers who will come and help clean up or set up or who knows, but that's been a great way to get people involved. So I certainly think if you want to show your enthusiasm, get involved and volunteer someplace. And then you'll feel even better when you do ultimately make a donation or something and you'll feel like it's going to good use.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. So we have another great question here. There's a bunch here. So this is something that I brought up as well and had mentioned. For Amy, how does the trust vet nonprofits? Does the trust follow up with nonprofits after a grant is made?
Oh, absolutely. Even before we make the grant, we do a pretty deep dive in understanding that organization. And usually, as I said, you can look at our website and we have all the criteria we look at and the strategies that we're following. The last thing we want someone to do is to apply for a grant that they're not going to be eligible for. So we try to do a lot of description before. So then when we get to know an organization, we really get to understand their programs and we understand sort of how the organization works. That's often when we're making our own grants and we're making a pretty significant bet on that organization. So we're doing a lot of due diligence. If you're on a donor advised fund side and you want to make a recommendation for this incredible nonprofit that I can't wait to go visit in Long Island City, Paula, I can't wait to go check it out. We also do that due diligence, right? We'll check on its tax records. We'll do all kinds of background research to make sure that our donors are giving to a really legitimate and hardworking nonprofit. So we do a fair amount of work through publicly available information, but we're pretty good at knowing what to look at and what is a good barometer or test of what a healthy nonprofit looks like. So and again, just look at our website. There's all kinds of stuff so that people seeking grants can also understand what are the sort of criteria that we're looking for. That's a great way for young nonprofits to climb the ladder of funding eligibility.
Wonderful, because actually Tagma here was wondering if you give grants to new organizations just starting up. So that
we will. I mean, we probably shouldn't have been an idea yesterday that you're applying for today, but yes, we are really proud to have been some of the first grants to, like, what are those crazy guys building a park up in the sky on the west side of New York, right? The High Line, and all kinds of great early stage organizations that often took root with an early bet from the New York Community Trust. But, we also have some really cool donor collaboratives on the donor advised fund side. There's a great group of women that get together and they make grants, and their group is called Well Met. And they individually pool their resources that live in one donor advised fund side. And they're always trying to outfox us. They're always trying to get a bet on a new and important, usually family support organization we haven't heard about yet. They always try to beat us. So it's a healthy competition.
Nice. That's wonderful. This is a fun question I would love for you to answer. Amy says, have you found that people actually enjoy giving their hard-earned money away to others?
Isn't that crazy? But it is for people that are, and I grew up like Paula's family and Dennis, like with a family that really cared about our community, and we just always gave. If it was just standing up, selling, giving out water at a race in our local national park that we used to support as kids. I mean, I think all of us find real joy in that. And I think those people that worked really hard want to give back, often to a city. I'll give an example of two wonderful funders two gentlemen, a couple that have made their permanent legacy gift to the New York Community Trust. They grew up as two guys, came to New York, met each other, lived through the AIDS crisis, lost so many friends, but were so proud to be from a city that supported their community and kept them healthy and safe through that time. And now they're giving back that legacy. There's nothing they want to do more than that. And it's just actually one of the great joys of my life that I get to spend time with people that love to do that and give back to the city they love or the community that they love.
And I think that's the thread that has been through this entire conversation, is the joy that it feels to give to others and to be involved, whether that be with your money and volunteering, and knowing that there are places like New York Community Trust that we can put our trust in, knowing that where our money is going, it can help the most important causes and organizations like, the Queens Public Library, and that we, no matter what money we have, we can stand alongside Paula Kirby and give the way she does in our own way and be able to make a difference in our community. So I thank the three of you for giving us this time today. This was, we could sit here and talk about it all day long, and I know everyone has the next thing to do, but it's such a pleasure to talk with the three of you. And thank you for your generosity of time. Dennis, Paula, Amy, thank you for sharing all of this with us today. And for everyone who's attended, thank you for being here and spending time. Please get started in giving. I shared the email and the website of New York Community Trust, so you can start reaching out and find out how you can start giving yourself and create a family legacy of giving, and be able to do good for others, and in turn also doing well for yourself and good things for yourself. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Have a wonderful afternoon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank
Bye.
you.